I reached this position against an old rival of mine named Boris Kramen in the U.S. Junior Championship in 1996. Kramen has always been a player who gets under my skin. He's a phenomenally talented, intuitive player and a keen, if ruthless, psychologist. Truth be told, he's a player who is simply unbound by the rules of engagement that other competitors adhere to. He'll snort while you think in time pressure. He's repeatedly kicked me under the table in the critical moment of a game. I've seen him blatantly cheat in Youth World Championship play and reduce opponents to tears with physical intimidation. Much of his competitive style relates to throwing the opponent off guard, and while he may not be a great ambassador for the game, Boris is a very formidable adversary, and he always brings out the worst in me. This is a game that exemplifies why it is important to keep a level head in competition. I was irritated by his tactics from the very start, and to his credit, was unable to keep cool when the game was on the line. I had the white pieces here. Take a look at the position. What would you do? It's my move. There's no question that I'm better. I have a nice expansion on the queen side. He has some weaknesses. His pawn on a6 is exposed, and my pawn on b4 can push up to b5, opening up his king safety whenever I want to. My rooks are opened up on the central files. His rooks are much more passive. His bishop is a little bit exposed. My pawns lock his pawns onto light squares, so my bishop is a little better than his. All in all, I have more activity than he does. That said, we know we don't want to just rush ahead when better. We have to find the right moves. What did you come up with white? What I should have played, and if I had had a clear head I would have very easily found the right moves, was queen a3, with the idea of knight a4 to b6. This is very strong. He has to do something about the b6 square, because if my knight gets there it'll be overwhelming. He would play bishop f7, because e6 is a very bad square for his bishop, and after knight a4, knight a8, I can force him to this kind of passivity. And then after c4, pushing into his center, the pawn is pinned to his queen, queen c7, after b5 in this position, only at the best moment, queen takes f4 check, I sacrifice the pawn, king b1. My game is very, very good. Although I'm down a pawn, his knight's under attack, my queen defends my knight on g3, and after knight d4, I play the brutal move c6, and his whole queen side, all of the defenses around his king fall apart. And this position is pretty much winning for white. I could have forced this from the original position if I had just been a little bit more patient and played queen a3. But as it was, I was already irritated by his tactics at this point. I was impassioned. My heart was beating. I didn't have the cool state of a competitor. Queen a3 I would almost definitely have won the game. I didn't have the patience. b5. This move is simply too early, but still, of course, my position is fine. He played a takes b5, bishop takes b5. Now, interestingly, immediately after I played b5, I saw the idea of queen a3. And this happens a lot as chess players. We're playing a game, and we make a move after a long think. And the second we make the move, almost while our hand is making the move, we see what we could have played, and we see it as a flash of revelation that the other thing was better than what we did. The reason for this is because when we make our move, it's as if our states of mind are completely refreshed. It's like when I play a move, I come back to the surface. I come back to the moment. I'm present again. I leave the labyrinth in which I was immersed when I was calculating the very deep variations. And often when we return to that presence, the correct move is very obvious. So you can use that to your advantage without having to make the errors again and again of making the mistake, which is that when you feel like you're about to make a move, sometimes in very complex positions, just do a little trick. Come back to the present moment. Look at the position as if you were making the move, and make sure that it seems right to you on the very surface layer. Make sure you're not missing something obvious. Make sure that you're not too much in the flow of your thought and overlooking something which you should see if you glance at the position that first time. What happened when I saw that I could have played queen a3 is that I got that old competitor's response of having my heart go boom, 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 boom. I realized I had gone a little wrong. It would have been much better for me to not realize that. Let's look why. Here he played bishop g4, attacking my rook. White to play. What would you do? After bishop g4, I started to feel my position slipping. I knew it was getting away from me. There are two things to do here. One is to treat this position as if we began play from here. Okay, no problem. His king's a little weak. My pawn structure might be a little weakened, but I have a nice pressure on his queen side. I can improve my position, double up my rooks, play a move like rook d3, preparing a rook swing over there. Something like that. That would be the logical thing to do. But instead of that, because I felt things going out of control, I wasn't just playing a chess game, because my opponent's psychological tricks to throw me off, which to his credit succeeded, and if I had been more stable in the moment, then I wouldn't have allowed them to bother me at all. I didn't look for the easy chess move. And if I look at the position now, obviously the best move for white is to play rook d3. Improve, get out of the way of the rook. I'm sure that's the move you would think to play. But at this point, I was trying to cling to the idea that I was winning before. I was playing very aggressively, very wildly. And here I played the most aggressive move in the position. I played rook d4, putting my rook under attack of his knight. But of course he can't take it because the knight's pinned to the queen. There was no reason to do this. My idea was to move my queen and to play rook a4, or maybe to play rook b4 in a very, very fancy way to do a rook lift and continue my attack. But this was completely unnecessary. And after rook d3, my position is still much better than his. I have a big attack, and if I'm a little patient, I should be able to make it work for me. But I played rook d4. Right now I'm in the downward spiral. Here I am, standing on the street, screaming at the bicycle as it fades into the distance, not seeing the taxicab as it comes from behind me. That was me right here, as I described in my introduction. He played e5. The taxicab has not come yet. My position is still fine. All I have to do is return to the moment. I played f takes e5, f takes e5. And I promise you, if right at this moment someone had walked up behind me, taken a big bucket of ice water and dumped it on my head, it would have been so great. I would have looked at the position, realized that things were a little bit dangerous. I would have said, oh, okay, played bishop takes c6, undermining control of the e5 square. We would have traded off, queen takes, pawn takes. I would have played rook takes e5, been up a pawn, he has compensation, fine. The position's equal, no problem. We probably would have drawn the game. No problem. All it would have taken is something to pop me back into the moment, and that's what I would have done. But what happened? I was still clinging to the idea that I had a huge attack, that I could win, that I was playing wildly. And what's interesting about the nuance of this psychology is that when you're in the type of position where everything is hanging, if you're very present, you can calculate your way through it. You can see pretty clearly what the correct ideas are. You can see the tactics. You can find unusual situations. But when you're playing emotionally, when you're clinging to something that was maybe 5 moves ago or 3 moves ago or even 1 move ago, what happens is that you don't calculate precisely, but you play a move hoping that he doesn't have something. Or often I've seen people do it, I've done it myself. They'll see the correct response for their opponent, but will hope that they miss it, because they're unable to make the emotional adjustment to playing the correct move. They're still clinging to the past evaluation, and that's what happened here. I played rook takes e5. I was so swept away by the romanticism of the idea of both my rooks hanging, of my attacking him with all my pieces in the air. I even saw his move, strange as it may seem, queen g7. And I just said to myself, in this very strange, abstract manner, after queen g7, bishop takes c6, I'm sure there'll be something, although I didn't see anything. There was no reason for me not to sit down and calculate. After rook takes e5, queen g7, bishop takes c6, queen takes rook. After I've sacrificed that exchange, is there a way for me to continue my attack effectively, or not? And if I had asked that to myself, I would have very quickly calculated that there was no way. The problem was that I was too immersed in the downward spiral. The game was slipping away from me, and I couldn't come back to the moment. After rook takes e5, he played the very simple queen g7, getting out of the pin, attacking my rook. Now both my rooks are hanging in sort of 2 ways. I'm in big trouble now. Bishop takes c6, queen takes e5. The strangest thing about this game is that in the transition from being winning to being losing, he didn't play one move that I didn't see. I was simply unable to click back into a sane state of competitive awareness. My idea now was bishop takes b7, king takes b7, c6, king c8. Now the attacking idea, queen a7. This might seem very good, it seemed a little bit romantic, but truth be told, there's no way for white to make it work. Black can get out of the attack by force. Why don't you try to calculate the way out for black? You'll see it's not so hard. He played rook d6, queen b7 check, king d8. Next you can see his bishop coming back to the defense on c8. Here I played rook takes g4 to stop that, continuing with the attack. H takes g4, queen b8 check, king e7, queen c7 check, king f6. Now I'm continuing with the attack, but it shouldn't work. Knight g to e4, d takes d4, knight takes e4. Now if he takes with the queen, I'll take his rook. He played king e6, knight g5 check, king f5, queen f7 check. Black is slipping away. queen f6, no more checks. And after c7, rook c8, I resigned the game. So, I'm sure you see that black's defense wasn't that hard. I've also told you that I didn't miss any ideas for black. What I want to be very, very clear to you is the remarkable contrast between how well I played in some games in which I was in a good psychological state, as opposed to how badly I played in this game in which I was thrown off. This is the reason for this course, the psychology of competition. I'm going to show you some of the worst moments in my chess career, some of the moments in which I played my very, very worst, because truth be told, that's a window into how I've learned chess over the years. I've made a deep study of all the games in which I've made big mistakes, especially big psychological mistakes. And from that study, I've made my weaknesses into strengths. So take this on yourself. Think about it. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever had a good position and then felt it slip away step by step by step and have been unable to regain your equilibrium? Well, if it has, then you're not alone. It's happened to me. I've seen it happen to pretty much every strong grandmaster I've ever studied the games of. That's part of the chess struggle. It's called chess blindness. We've all felt it. So if you feel this happening in a game, come back to the moment. Try to be present to the immediate situation. So I'm sure you can also see how the last theme of materialism can feed into the downward spiral. You're looking at a game, you're feeling quite certain about the result of it, you feel very confident, you judge the position with a certain kind of finality. Then it starts to slip away. What you had taken for granted before is fading into the past. And then what happens is you become emotional, you start thinking about, oh my gosh, your heart starts to pound, you start to sweat, and you fall into a downward spiral. Being too high brings you too low. Being too result-oriented makes you start to feel desperate. The next game we're going to look at is a combination of these two themes from another game from my student, Lee Gardner. In this game, he begins the position with a materialistic judgment, and he quickly falls into a downward spiral.